Over the years, marketers have been analyzing the different generations, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and recently we have seen there's a red thread among all of them: speed. They all want everything to happen now. My name is Francisco Serrano, and I am the Chief Speed Officer at One-to-One and the host of the TheNowGen podcast. Join me. Each episode, we talk about what's happening with brands, see how brand professionals across different industries cope with this fast-changing market, and live up to the expectation of this now generation. Welcome.
This episode is brought to you by One-to-One, the fastest day-to-day design, content, and digital studio. One-to-One has been the premier partner for many Fortune 500 companies, proving that tight deadlines shouldn't be a hassle.
Hey, hello, and thank you again to another episode of the TheNowGen podcast. As you know, consumer goods is the cornerstone of the now generation. What this means is that we consume products every single day, and we do it under the influence of a lot of marketing efforts for many brands out there. Today, we're going to be talking to Úrsula Mejía Melgar. She's the marketing director of Southern Europe at Diageo, and she will tell us how does she manage to connect with this now generation that it's making our lives a little bit more challenging. So, Úrsula, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Francisco. It's a pleasure.
Okay, before we dive into the conversation, why don't you tell us about your journey and what is it exactly that you do now at Diageo?
Sure, fantastic. So I'm originally from Mexico City, and half Guadalajara, as you as well. I've been around the world. I'm originally a chemical engineer, believe it or not. But my first job with Procter & Gamble took me into the amazing world of marketing. And once I started, I couldn't stop, like eating Lay's, like once you start, you can stop. And then I just kept them going. So I've been at Procter & Gamble. I was responsible for the launch of AOL, or America Online Internet Services, in Mexico. I then moved to the United States, I did a master's in advertising, living in Minneapolis. Have worked for General Mills for 8 years, moved with General Mills from Minneapolis to Switzerland with Nestle under the partnership that they have, moved over to Mondelez, and now I've been at Diageo for 3.5 years in Southern Europe, based off Madrid. So obviously a journey across FMCG companies. I've done, as a good marketeer, all sorts of jobs, including from P&L management, innovation, branding, e-commerce, digital, like you can imagine, on a variety of categories, from detergent to internet services to cereals, yogurts, granola bars, chocolates, biscuits, gum, candy, and now spirits. So my responsibilities today encompass amazing brands like our beloved Don Julio from Mexico, or Casamigos Tequilas, Johnny Walker, Lagavulin, or many other malts portfolio, Baileys, J&B, Tanqueray in the jeans portfolio. So I'm responsible for a portfolio of over 200 brands, with focus on around maybe 15 with heavy investment for Southern Europe, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece. And I oversee marketing efforts, innovation, and strategy for the company.
Oh, perfect. That's a huge responsibility for you, and many brands and many lives that you impact with all the messages that you convey. So tell me, when you're sitting down and figuring out what kind of messages you're going to throw across, what's the strategy? What's the strategy to connect with this now generation? What are you thinking? What is it that goes through your mind, and how do you set up the right atmosphere to engage?
I think it's all about the relevancy. I think in this new world, attention span, as we know, it's minimal. And you need to convey something that it's really relevant for people in their daily lives, in the end, I work in a category or in an industry that it's all about social connections, right? What we're fostering, when it's all about the spirits category, it's enabling people to connect socially, to engage in meaningful experiences, whether it's you and I having a drink on after a meal, or it can be early evening, or it can be a night of partying. So it's all about those memories that we hold on to as life goes on. And I think the brand that you choose needs to mean something for you. So what's in my mind constantly is, how is this going to be relevant for consumers? Why are they going to choose us? Because the experiences are going to happen, the moments are going to happen, but we aim for preference. And preference will only happen if we are meaningful, if there's relevance, which is very different for each brand that we have in the portfolio, for each category. But in the end is, what are you bringing for consumers? So that if your brand was to disappear today, what will they miss about your brand? Not your product, but your brand overall. The emotional aspect you can convey, the product you can convey, but the experiences you are creating.
And Ursula, you mentioned that your responsibility goes and goes into a global realm. So how do you connect with all the different countries?
Well, over Zoom to begin with. How do we do it? I think it's a back and forth. So at Diageo, we're structured in such a way that we have global brand teams. So our most iconic brands have a central team responsible for defining the future of the category. Something that's super interesting and consumers might not realize is that when we talk, for example, about whiskey is an aged product, and it takes at a bare minimum 12 years to age for 12 years declared whiskeys, in some cases 3. Tequila is also an aged product. So when you're doing forecasts and you're defining what consumers are going to want into the future, if it takes me 12 years, for example, to age Johnny Walker Black Label, I need to start thinking what consumers are going to want in 12 years' time now. So global teams are responsible for this very long-term direction of the brand, being the owners of brands, because most of our brands are 200 years old. Johnny Walker is 200 years old. J&B is 275 years old. Tanqueray is 200 years old. Maybe one of the newest is Bailey's, which is turning 50 this year. But they are old brands. They are known. They are respected. But we need to maintain that connection of a global team and a local team. For me, the most important thing is to inform them of what my consumers look like, how consumers are evolving, what are the demands, not only consumer, but what is the cultural environment like. Brands, particularly in this industry, need to be embedded in culture. Whereas global teams really need to be in tune with that. I also need to equip them of thinking about the future, and they need to come back to me and equip me with that. So it's a variety of forums, it's a variety of formats. And then there is a global planning team that helps us massively in understanding how we're going to evolve. So we are a very active global company. And even though I have local jurisdiction, it's really vital that we communicate back and forth with those global entities that oversee our global category role moving forward.
Yeah, because I would imagine that the hurdles you need to go through internally as a global brand and the drive that you need to gain with your customers. Not only, I mean, in one country you have cultural differences between the targets, but also between countries. I mean, Portugal is not the same as Spain, even though they're neighbor countries, or that France.
Absolutely. And you know what? The funny thing is, the stereotypes become real. Once you embed yourself into culture, and I said this with all the respect, right? But historical nuances of each country really derive into what the culture is like and how they behave and what they expect. And again, I'm going back to socializing, but how they socialize, what connections mean for them, what a moment of togetherness means for them, what a party looks like. And even though everyone's listening to reggaeton right now, it's this evolution of the party moments are different per country, and you need to be in tune with them. So being close to consumers is pivotal for me. And believe it or not, part of my job is going to Mykonos to see what the party is looking like, or to Ibiza, and going out. So that's actually an active part of my role.
Well, I would like to join you anytime that you have a trip. I can be a very good counselor, you know. Now, talking about tequila, I am, I was born in Guadalajara, very near the tequila town. And the reason, as a consumer, the reason why I have a tequila, I now live in the US, that I drink tequila, it's completely different than my neighbor and completely different than the youngsters that go to the disco. And I would imagine that that itself for your premium brands in tequila is just a hustle to go through that. Does e-com in your realm has influenced the way this generation purchases alcohol?
A little bit. I would say during the pandemic, for sure, the behavior changed. I would say that maybe the biggest role that e-com has played is in informing consumers about products. So whether you enter Amazon or any other, like direct seller, like a pure player, to talk about a product, you see a lot of reviews. So maybe one of the biggest roles that digital ecosystems nowadays are playing for consumers is that of information, obviously, but other consumer reviews inform you of what to do. So we can do massive campaigns around tequila or around any other product, link ourselves to a celebrity, be present, but consumers are still looking for that information. And that we are seeing that in any ecosystem, right? You're going to buy a car, but you look at what others are saying about that car. The same happens with tequila. So people reference it in that way. Then the e-com presence changes by market. If you're looking at Europe, it can fluctuate anyway between 2 to 10% of your sales going through e-com. Now, something super interesting that might be very interesting for your audience is that, for example, the sales of spirits, alcohol in countries like North America, like the US, for example, the vast majority goes either through retail or e-com. And only a smaller portion of that, maybe 20 or 30%, is consumed in what we call the on-trade, which is restaurants, bars, nights, clubs, etc. Southern Europe is what I like to call the playground of the world. And about 70% of our consumption happens in restaurants, bars, and party places for many reasons. I mean, historically, and going back to that cultural aspect, we are a leisurely culture. Whether it's Spain or Greece or Italy, people know how to enjoy life. It's not about not working. It's about enjoying the moments of socializing. They tend to happen outside of home. So while in the United States, it's very easy to have a gigantic house, households in Europe tend to be smaller. So people, rather than having people over, you meet at a bar after work or over the weekend, you go out. And then we have the hotspots of the world. So when you think of France, you still think of Spain. First and foremost, we are the countries with the most Michelin star awarded restaurants. We are the countries with, we have Ibiza, we have Cannes, we have Saint-Tropez, we have Mykonos when it comes to summer hotspots, but also winter. We have San Moritz, we have Cortina, we have Baqueira. This is where people come to have fun. So consumption of spirits is always linked to leisurely activities, vacationing, and that drives a lot of our consumption. So that's part of what we do.
Impressive. I've never seen it in that, but it makes sense. It makes full sense. It's completely different way of consumer behavior, right? And you and I were talking about this offline, the instant gratification from different generations. How do you see that in the consumer goods industry? Do you see that they correlated and it's like the codependency one another of trying to meet that I want it now type of thing?
First and foremost, I would say yes. The pace of life has changed across everything that we do, right? We can be watching Netflix and have a second and even a third screen. So a lot of people have these multi-dimensional lives, which are much more saturated than our parents or grandparents 20, 50, or 80 years ago. So there's the instant gratification to me comes at speed, which is the speed that we are getting used to. It's lives full of content, of stimuli, and obviously we expect the rewards to happen in the same way. Now, on the flip side, I would say we also tend to have a misconception of younger generations. We think they don't have patience. We think they don't have clarity of what they want. We tend to think they are superficial. And I think it's just a different way of depth. One of the things that I love the most, and thankfully I have nieces and nephews who are anywhere 24, 21, 20, 19 years old. I have an almost 18-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. And I find it fascinating to connect with them, to spend time with them, understanding what their wishes and desires and intrigues are. And when you scratch the surface, you understand that the instant gratification is not it's not whining driven. It's not that I want it now, like just a cry for help. But in many cases, it's because they firmly believe the world is equipped to deliver at that pace. And it's super interesting. For example, I was talking to my 15-year-old son, and we were talking about Kanye West and the fact that he's releasing a new album in 3 parts soon. And this album was announced to be released in December, then it got moved to January, now it's February. But they understand, and when you talk to them, they will tell you, it's because he's doing this or he's doing that. And there's, rather than the whininess, there's an anticipation building up. But when it's worthy for them, they are willing to wait. What it's important for them is to understand why instant gratification is not happening. So to me, that's the pivotal piece. It's not about not being able to wait, but it's about having the information as to why it's not happening immediately. So it's a savvier subset of a generation. And I think we need to be equipped as marketeers to understand that and to equip people with information. This is the era of information, and we tend to forget that.
Completely agree with you. Just a brief sharing with you about this topic is that when we opened the office in Europe about 4 years ago in Amsterdam, and started, doing things with this global brands, but in Europe, completely different scheme of what they prioritize from one thing or the other. For example, innovation and sustainability, they're completely linked. And I mean, you go into buying a ticket and there's an option of saying, hey, you want to spend 100 euros to be green, and it was like, no, next. How do you even put it there in Air France? Because it's relevant what you were saying at the beginning. So in your realm right now, what's the innovation and sustainability look like?
Yeah, so when we talk about sustainability at Diageo, we obviously think about the viability of the business in the long term. And I'd like to interpret it that way. So it's not only about the impact on the world per se from an ecological standpoint, if you will, or from a food carbon standpoint, but it's also about what does it mean from a societal standpoint? What does it mean from an ethical standpoint? What does it mean from the impact we can have end-to-end through our value chain? And I like to think the first thing that I'd like to talk about is about what I call the new 2 piece of advertising or marketing. So historically, we know it's product and placement and price, but I introduced 2, which is purpose and personalization. So purpose is at the core as to why your brand exists and what's the role your brand is playing. And I think we need to interpret brands as bigger players in the world, not only the historical of a detergent is here to clean your clothes. It needs to be way bigger than that. And I think as marketeers, we have the responsibility of understanding what is it that we're bringing truly for consumers beyond clean clothes, if you're a detergent, or beyond a moment of socializing, if you are a spirits brand, and I can keep going on. That's the first one. And the other is, on the other full extreme, is personalization. And by personalization, I don't mean Coke cans with a name. I mean what that brand means to you specifically. And how are we going to deliver that specific value to you? How do we show up? What do we stand for? How can we help you make that moment more meaningful? And so for me, sustainability is looking at that end-to-end value chain, starting off with your purpose and ensuring that you can drive that better story and you can hold true to that story. So for example, we have a brand called J&B. It's a whiskey. It's a very old whiskey. It's been super iconic in Spain. It has been the biggest spirit brand in the country for many, many years. And it's a brand that is historically democratic, right? So 20 years ago was the most drunk whiskey in Spain. People know it, people loved it. But it was for everyone. Your father will drink it, you will drink it, your friends will drink it, your aunts will drink it. And that democratization has evolved now into what we call to make it the most inclusive brand in the world. And starting with that, for example, we put out a campaign that if you have not seen, I will invite you to watch. It's called She. It's an ad called She from J&B. And it depicts a grandfather. I'm not going to unveil the secret so people can go online. But it was an ad just created for Spain alone. And then it was picked up by media in about 60 countries. It was featured on CNN, on Fox, in the UK as well, by The Guardian, newspapers. I mean, we have won over 85 awards in over 23 festivals, Lions Cans, etc. But that's because even though it stays true to what the whiskey brand is, we are amplifying our message to be relevant, to drive sustainability for the product, because we're talking about how to be a brand that creates a new world. So I'll invite you to watch it. It's in the LGBTIQ plus context, but highly celebrated ad. But that to me is starting off with who you are, what's your purpose, and that you can really truly hold on to. It's not about going out and planting trees. It's not about trying to be something you have never been. It's about finding what have you always stand for or stood for, and actually amplifying that. And I think it's a beautiful way to evolve brands, and the greatest challenge that all marketeers have today, but without a doubt, maybe the single biggest both opportunity and best experience you can have.
I'm sure, and I agree. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we went and put 12,000 trees because that means sustainability. I completely agree. In our realm is, instead of producing a TV ad, why don't we transform that ad, make it less, so you don't have that much of emissions, and you're generating less production costs and whatever, so less emissions, and the ad is going to be good. So adapting what currently you have.
The other thing is, brands that are as iconic as the ones I have the privilege of managing are by nature, by earned right, if you will, platforms for voice and visibility. So at a bare minimum, it's the responsibility of a brand to bring topics to the forefront that otherwise are not being addressed. So be the voice and drive visibility, either for cohorts or issues or problematics that are not seeing the light. So I think brands have a responsibility. And I think above and beyond who's managing the brand or who owns the brand, brands historically have a spectrum of things they could talk about. Now, if you're a skincare product by nature, you're connected to skin. Can you talk about race? Can you talk about diseases? Can you talk about some damage? Like, what can you do that is related to the spectrum, that it's attached to who you are as a brand? And then how do you take that on and amplify it further in a meaningful way?
Agreed. So before we wrap this one out, last question for you. In this fast-paced world, everything's happening so fast. The term speed, what do you think about speed and the marketing challenges for brands out there today? Do you think that brands should really take this term and own it in order to conquer this market?
think rather than speed, maybe I like the term agility better. So speed makes me think of a Formula One car, which is great if you are in the right environment to drive at speed, because you're equipped, you're protected, and you have the track. That to me is speed. Agility to me is more pointed on reacting at the right time over the right stimuli, which is a two-way thing, rather than just going on a speed race type mindset. Agility is the ability to go back and forth, connect the landscape of what's happening, the evolution that you're foreseeing, and adapt quickly to that. So I would say maybe one of the things I would celebrate the most in my team is the ability to act with that agility. So for example, another example I can bring to the table on agility is a fake out of home that we just built for Tanqueray 00 in Madrid, which is in Madrid on Gran Via. There is this iconic Schweppes out of home with lights. It has been there for 50 years. It's super well known. And we create a fake out of home in which a gigantic bottle of Tanqueray 00 gets poured over it, and a helicopter brings a piece of glass, or of ice, it's everywhere. But that was developed with agility. We had an idea, we breathed, and 2 weeks later we were out. It was not costly, it cost us less than $10,000 or euros. And we learned why it works. But I think that agility on the ability of using technology, understanding consumers, finding the right moment, finding the right partners, it's what can help us move forward at pace. So I'd say agility, and that'd be my preferred word.
Yeah, that's good. So it is important that everybody kind of embrace that kind of a momentum towards
Yes.
executing.
It's about moving forward. Speed to me is a metaphor for moving forward, not staying static. Those that stay static more than 24 hours, the brand is going to die. So we need to be always looking for what's next with curiosity. I think that would be my other favorite word. It's the curiosity and the agility to drive speed.
Great. Thank you, Úrsula, for sharing those ideas with us. I appreciate you. Where can people reach out to you if they want to connect and continue the conversation, Úrsula?
Of course, so they can find me on LinkedIn as Úrsula Mejía Melgar, Diageo. You'll find my face with some bottles of spirits. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's also Úrsula Mejía Melgar. Not too many secrets. You can Google me. You'll see a lot of what I've done and what my team has done. And I'll be delighted to connect further.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, thank you for listening to this podcast. We've been talking to the wonderful Úrsula Mejía Melgar. She's the marketing director for Southern Europe at Diageo. Thank you for sharing those ideas. And remember, if you would like to be at the head of the curve and learning what the now generation is doing and what brands are doing to face those challenges, do not miss the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.